Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life.
Hey, Health Junkies. On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, I'm interviewing Autumn McLees. If that name sounds familiar to you, you're correct. She was on the podcast about probably almost 2 years ago. But here's the thing. Autumn was speaking about all of the different health conditions that she has overcome or is overcoming. And I realized that she has a special insight in something called lichen sclerosus, and in particular of the vaginal tissue. Now, if you've ever heard of this or have it, this is going to be a great podcast for you to listen to what Autumn did to help rejuvenate her tissue and not have any pain and really just be able to manage any flare-ups that may show up. And of course, she's going to talk about what kind of things she did to prevent and also to work with the initial diagnosis and how she helped to basically get rid of it. So here's the thing. Lichen sclerosus is an autoimmune condition. It can affect the vaginal tissue. It can affect the mouth as well. It's a wild thing. And I have a lot of patients that actually have this and come to me looking for solutions. Now, I have used a type of cream, and I'll put that in the podcast notes at drjkrausenD.com so that you can see what cream I've used as well, which has some medications in it. But the idea is Autumn is a holistic health expert. She is trying to help women break free from using conventional medicines, conventional norms, and she wants folks to reclaim their health through root cause types of solutions. And so she actually did this all with diet and lifestyle changes. And so that's pretty impressive. But I get it, because lichen can be a type of condition that feels like there are razor blades in the tissue that's affected. And so you can imagine, if that's vaginal tissue, how painful that is. And there's tears and there's a lot of inflammation down below. Nevertheless, if you've never heard of this condition, you're like, I have no idea what this is all about. This podcast is still relevant because Autumn's going to be talking about any type of autoimmune condition, what we would do in that case to help to reverse the symptoms. And what she describes in terms of the diet, she describes a little bit of the Candida diet. She talks a little bit about a anti-inflammatory diet. And these are the things that I want folks to really hear about, how just changing how you eat can make a huge difference. You do not have to go towards all the fancy supplements, medications, biohacking tools, et cetera, et cetera. So I brought Autumn McLees back on so that she could talk all about her experience with lichen sclerosus and how she overcame it and how she's pretty much preventing it now, and the things that trigger inklings that it could come back and what she does to get things back in balance. All right, so let's reintroduce you to Autumn McLees. Autumn McLees, welcome back to the Health Fix podcast. Well, I had to, because I have had so many folks talking to me about lichen and just really being like, I need some help. I want to hear a story of someone that has been through it, can give us some insights in terms of lifestyle and what kind of things we might not be thinking about, beyond me being like, well, I read that this cream works really well. So, it's just having some support for the ladies out there. I'm so excited today to talk about what went down and all the things. So first and foremost, I think the biggest is sharing symptoms, because a lot of people who are listening may or may not know what happens to the skin when we get lichen sclerosus.
Yeah, lichen sclerosus. So some of my first symptoms were a bit of itchiness and then vaginal tearing. Now, I was married about 7 years into marriage at the time, when all of a sudden during our intimacy, I'm like, what the heck was that? Like, what's going on down there? Like, you literally feel like there's paper cuts and you're just getting like all these micro tears. You can also sit on the toilet, and just the sheer fact of sitting there and gravity and everything kind of settling, you can also experience what feels like some micro tears, or just like these shooting, very tender, pains that take place in the vaginal area. It can also be in the rectum as well. So it depends upon the woman. So my story was, this is taking place, right? Mind you, I had come off of a cruise, so I wasn't super health-minded at the time. I'm the type of person that can splurge and eat whatever I want, and I don't gain weight. Well, I splurged a lot on sugar. Come to find out, we did tests. I didn't have a yeast infection. This tearing sensation continued. So I went to the OBGYN, and I never bothered to look down there to see what was going on. Obviously, he did. And he spotted some white patches, which seems to be classic for this type of condition. And he wanted to do a punch biopsy, which is where they essentially take a little sample of the skin and send it in and go from there. I got the results back. He said, you have lichen sclerosus, which, by the way, my mom had it as well. Hers somehow ended up going away on its own. That was obviously many, many years ago. But he gave me a cream, a steroid cream, and said, okay, here you go. Have a nice life. The steroid cream, when I'm looking at the side effects, so conveniently says that it can thin you out, thin your skin out. I'm thinking, there's no way in heck that I am using this cream because I'm already thin enough to the point where I'm tearing and having these problems. I'm not going to take this steroid cream, and there was these other side effects, etc. So I decided that I was going to seek out other holistic alternatives to see what could be done.
Oh my goodness. You know, one of the things that I hear from women a lot is like, yeah, I didn't want to look down there. I was like, we're not taught to inspect ourselves much. And then we have all kinds of other things depending on our upbringing and whatnot.
Yeah. Now I check. Now I know. And I've also become a birth doula since and, gotten a little bit more comfortable with that whole concept. But I would suggest that if anybody thinks they're having any sort of symptoms, take a look down there because it might clue you into what's going on.
Yeah. And if your partner is open to helping you out, if you have a partner that you trust, then having them help you out, look and see what's going on in there. Oh my gosh. Just thinking through the pain and I almost can feel it from you and feel it when my patients talk about it too. It's just incredible. And then when you think about steroid creams, and I think this is an incredibly important point that you brought up that a lot of people don't know, that steroid creams will thin any skin. Not just vaginal skin in general. And so that being the only solution, and I'm guessing like he didn't bring up anything else, just
steroid cream. Here's a cream. Have a nice life. We don't know why you have this. We don't know what you can do about it, but expect to have it for the rest of your life. And part of my story goes that I just come off from having my son via C-section. I wanted to have a vaginal birth with my second child. And I'm thinking, there's no way this is going to happen if I can't even be intimate with my husband, let alone push a baby out. Spoiler alert, I had my vaginal birth and I didn't even tear.
Wow.
But that is the power of...
And that's exactly what I wanted to bring up today too, because I think a lot of people get to this situation and maybe they might look on, ChatGPT now or Grok or Reddit and see the horror stories of what people say, or look into, I call them forums, but they're Facebook groups or whatnot, to see what people are saying. And you don't tend to hear the stories of the positive side and taking back control of your health. And I know that's a big theme for you in your practice as well. Now, when you were like, all right, I've got this functional medicine doc. She's not super familiar, but she's got an idea. Where did you guys start? What did you start diving into?
Okay, and I want to say just one thing before I delve into that is you're so right on the groups, like the Facebook groups, because I randomly decided to join a Facebook group for lichen sclerosus to be able to try and share my story. And it's almost like people are totally skeptical. Like I've got like a horn coming out of my head or something. They don't believe me. And I get it. Like that's the narrative that I was shared in allopathic medicine of like, well, this is not curable. So have a nice life, So I just want to state that, I understand that those listening, that's a hard thing to struggle with of like, we're told this, but in the holistic realm of things where we address things at more of the root cause, I am sure you have seen so much healing take place, so much progress that can be made when it comes to our health and some of these conditions. So to answer your question, and so ran a bunch of blood work, found that my ANA levels were apparently equal to someone with lupus. However, I didn't have all the other markers and I didn't have all the other symptoms. So clearly, my body was not doing great. And I was not tending to it well, and I was not eating well, and I was not, being a good steward. So when she got that back, then we evaluated and she put me on a diet that, well, the first part of the diet was a candida diet. Are you familiar with a candida diet?
But share for the folks that may not be.
So she went ahead and evaluated me vaginally and felt like, based on what she experienced, I had a bit of candida present. And candida is a fungus that can come in and take over and overgrow. It has a lot of symptoms associated with it, and it can be a bit of a pain in the butt. And it typically comes from eating too much sugar and flour, and, antibiotics and that kind of thing can also play a role when you disrupt your gut bacteria and there's not a healthy balance anymore. The bad guys can kind of start to take over, and they have a purpose there, but we're not doing our part in helping balance that out. And so she recognized that I had a bit of that going on. And so the candida is really, a candida diet's a really strict diet. That's something everybody can go look up. I think it's probably on Pinterest and, it's out there, right? It's basically no sugar for coconut based or something. It was something unique to her, but we were doing some douches and then was doing the candida diet for those 6 weeks. I remember at the month mark, I stopped tearing. That was huge. So up until that point, it's like, I don't know. And sure enough, put it to the test, for lack of a better word, and stopped tearing. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. This is crazy. This is mind-blowing, because that means that what I put in my mouth actually correlates with down south. That was a true epiphany, a mind-blowing concept that I don't think we really think much about, how much it matters what we eat and consume can actually correlate with the most random places. So that was the first successful point for me. Hallelujah, the tearing has stopped. So then I was able to move into sugar, natural sugars like fruits and things, but still no dairy, no gluten. And I continued that for about another 3 months. I stuck to it because I knew that if I had already seen what my body was capable of, which it had stopped tearing, that maybe there would be actual further progress. So long story short, at the end of the 4 months, I went and got blood work done. She did another evaluation physically, and my ANA levels were just like points away from normal.
Nice.
And that's it in a nutshell. But yeah, I'll let you. I'll open it up to you have questions.
Sure. Well, of course, people are always going to be like, okay, do I have to be that strict? Because of course, that's always the question I get. And my answer is always yes. The more strict you are, the more it was really going to make a difference. And sounds like you were really adhering big time. Like you were like, I'm not messing around with this. I'm going to do it hardcore.
Yeah. Yes. And I knew because, I tell people a lot of the times when they want to go the more holistic route, you're paying out of pocket usually for this with such practitioners. Don't spend the money if you're not going to do what they say to do. And that's going to be hard things. You're not going to go to your regular doctor in the white coat and he's not going to tell you to do these things that I was told to do. You're never going to hear that. I mean, if I don't even think I ever went back to him, he'd probably be flabbergasted to see the changes, the physical changes, and to hear my story. They don't hear that all that often. My experience, she did throw in some supplements. I remember taking some basic things like magnesium and some vitamin D and, some basic supportive nutritional supplements. But diet was just everything. And she did suggest that I be mindful of my stress, that I tend to my emotional health. And so I implemented that, but I think it's the combination of being able to remove the interference of all the crap and other stuff I was eating that was not conducive, not helping my body. Certainly I wasn't coming up out of it. And when you completely shift all of that and you watch the terrain of your body shift and change, then you watch healing take place.
That's awesome. To just give folks a little bit of a idea of what kind of things were you eating? Because I think a lot of people always are like, what did you eat?
Mhm.
What were you doing? Like, what were you eating big time before? Like, giving a perspective of like, what kind of things were like your jam before? And then what kind of things did you kind of start making like on the regular while you were through the
Mhm.
diet?
Is that no matter what we're diagnosed with, whether it be lichen sclerosis or something else, something needs to change because the way we're doing things is not working. Our body is not able to stay in a healthy state. And so I switched. Candida diet was obviously the most strict. I remember eating, come to think of it now, eating scrambled eggs. And I think I could have, can't remember if it was during the Candida diet or after, but scrambled eggs and avocado and salsa on my scrambled eggs. I remember eating, she let me have rice. So I was able to get some of those rice cakes and
Oh yeah.
almond butter and like have those as a snack. And then when I'd go out to dinner, I mean, there's the whole farm raised salmon, right? But I was probably at restaurants that, it was farm raised, but my body was still able to heal on it, so I would pick steak. She didn't want me to have a whole lot of meat. She said, like, I think 1 to 3 times a week, not too much. But I remember getting salmon and some rice and maybe some sweet potatoes. I don't think I could have baked potatoes. So anyway, things like that I just stuck to. And it was not fun. At times I felt like I would end up maybe like fasting through a meal, which I've heard some wonderful things when it comes to fasting and lichen sclerosis. So that might be something to consider as well. But just being willing to sacrifice the joy of eating so that my body had a chance to change and heal. And that's not a concept that we're all that familiar with in today's day and age, to actually set our taste buds aside and, for the sake of allowing our body to heal. But I've seen great and amazing stories and testimonies of people that have overcome all sorts of conditions when they live not to serve the God of their taste buds.
I like that. I like that. So obviously I kind of put you on the spot with it being a while ago, but obviously we've come quite a few years
Hmm.
forward from there. And it sounds like you didn't do anything topical, just the douches. That was it. No creams, no nothing, which is impressive because that is where I've went with some of my folks. Now, in terms of maintenance going forward and moving into perimenopause and having a baby, did you notice any flares after having your baby and give us kind of like the year sense what's happened and how do you maintain like what's your routine?
And that holistic functional medicine doctor had recommended opening up part of a probiotic and putting it in your underwear. So if you're struggling with lichen sclerosis vaginally, that helped immensely with the itching. It's a brilliant concept. So you can put as much or as little as you want. And I mean, it was magical how much
Huh.
it took away the itching. So, and it also kind of helps get some of that good bacteria into the places that it needs to be to help balance out what is clearly very imbalanced. After having my daughter, so yes, I went the 4 months. I got pregnant a couple months after that. She said, you're a couple points from normal. Stay eating clean and you have my thumbs up on getting pregnant. So conceived my baby, had a beautiful home birth actually here at my house, and it did not even tear. And that's what's truly remarkable about this whole journey. And it really built my belief in what is possible with the body, how the body is made to heal if you can address the things that it needs and or the lack thereof. It loses its flexibility, and to know that my body was actually able to revert back and to actually push a baby out is pretty miraculous.
I'm more like, okay, so no tearing whatsoever. Did you do any pelvic floor work, breath work, anything leading up to that?
Mm-mm. Not for me. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be helpful. I could imagine it probably would,
Yeah.
but not personally for me. And after I saw the power of what this whole experience was, this whole journey, that my body healed. I couldn't help but stay eating and learning to live as healthy and as clean as I possibly could. I didn't want this to come back. I woke up to a lot of things. I ended up reading a book called Natural Cures. They don't want you to know about it. It was like on this infomercial, and totally funny because I like never even watch infomercials. I never buy anything from infomercials, but I bought this book. I woke up to all the things in our food supply, MSG and obviously all the dyes and things. And thanks to social media now, because back when I was struggling with this, it wasn't as prominent. We have more awareness to this, but people need to actually implement it. You have to be mindful and consider what you're purchasing at the grocery store, and maybe learn to look and identify some very toxic ingredients that you should not be consuming. So have I stayed perfect all these years? No, I have not. And there has been a time or two where I felt like maybe something was starting back up, but usually for me, it ended up correlating back with I might be having too much sugar, even though it's organic sugar or organic this or that, or maybe some dairy. Dairy can be very inflaming for some people, and some would argue all people, but apparently it seems to be a thing for me. Anytime I get too comfortable with the dairy or too much sugar, I see that can kind of start. It's never gotten to the point where it's full-fledged tearing and all the symptoms again, like what it was before. But yeah, I've noticed it kind of start to creep in, and I just switched my diet. Add some coconut oil down south, do the probiotic trick. And for the most part, I know what to do.
I like the probiotic trick. I never would have thought about that. I would have thought that it would come out of the underwear and it wouldn't get to where it needed to be. But I guess we do have some moisture down there where it could stick. Was there a particular, I'm asking you guys, I'm being kind of mean because I'm asking her to go back that far. I don't know if you remember what kind of probiotic, or if you feel things coming back now and you have, what probiotic do you use?
I'm trying to think. It's a pink and white bottle.
Megaspore?
Gosh darn it, it escapes me, but it is a good brand. This is not helpful at all because I don't know the name, but anyway, it's a pink and white bottle, and it's like got like good spores of probiotics in it. So it's not a cheap brand. I probably wouldn't, go recommend to just buy a cheapo depot. Like buy a decent quality probiotic. And try a little bit in your underwear, and you can kind of pat it up in there, help it get up in, and it works amazing. It's great.
I like it. I'm wondering if it was Megaspore, like Megaspore Biotic.
That's what it was. Yep.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that was it. Yep.
Because that one's been around a long time, and it's one of my, I love that. I love that probiotic, especially when we need to reseed. I know we have the seed probiotic these days, but the Megaspore biotic was one of the ones I always thought about for reseeding. So, all right, noted, guys. We'll make sure we put this in the podcast notes. Don't worry. Now, when it comes to, mindset and taking back control, and this is something we talked a lot about, in our previous podcast when we were talking about your health as a whole, and we were talking about all of the different things that you've experienced. With Lichen, what was one of the big things that you kind of kept in your mind all along? Like, did you believe okay, I can do this. I can do this?
I will tell you, obviously the desperation to have a vaginal birth with my second child was a big motivator. And I was ready, and it had been 3 years, and I'm like, okay, I want to do this. I need to do this. So obviously that was a big motivator because I did not want another C-section. I really wanted to have that vaginal birth. I would say that, yeah, you have to have a healthy, realistic mindset going into such discipline, changing your life like that. I got a grocery list. I pre-planned some of my food and snacks. So it's like, okay, this is what I can have. And she was a big advocate for fresh herbs, for a salad every day, making smoothies with herbs. Like she's just like herbs. She was big on herbs. And I didn't always get that many herbs into me, but I snuck them in when I could. But, to take on such a life adjustment like that is really, you need to plan ahead. And so that's where figuring out my grocery list, my snacks, my go-tos, whatever would be a treat. I mean, they have when I was on the Candida diet, they actually have Candida diet desserts. So I would find something that I could make so that you can kind of feel normal, and even though it's not the typical, I get it. It's hard. It is hard, but it's also worth it. He got stronger, and it was such an empowering experience to see that, okay, all I did was feed my body these things and take tabs on my stress and make sure I'm drinking enough water. And, some of these is basic principles, but it's worth it. And I came out of this experience realizing, wow, like my body really is powerful and wonderfully made. It's God's design to be a self-healing organism, but not if we don't give it what it needs. And so part of that is I had to look at reality, what I wasn't doing. And that's hard to do sometimes. But I had a good practitioner, and she kind of lovingly whacked me over the head a little bit and be like, hey, we can do this, but you got to be willing to change, because that I wanted to take on more than, having this ball and chain and this struggle.
Absolutely. Well, it's so important to have a why, right? So you had the why and you had multiple whys. One, not to have it come back, because I think for a lot of women, they'll get desperate, but it is the hardest thing is to change, of course, the diet and what to do there. But gosh, so incredible. Now, of course, folks haven't listened to our previous podcast. I want to give them a little bit of sense of you've been through more things since the lichen, and you've overcome them as well. And so give us a little bit background again, help us refresh our minds in terms of the other things you've overcome since lichen.
Well, I am overcome me, people say,
Yes.
currently, because this is another big giant that has come my way that I actually got off a podcast earlier today, sharing with a doctor on this whole narrative. Yeah, the lichen sclerosus experience was my first experience with holistic functional medicine, or diet and supplements and lifestyle play a role in how you overcome. Whole new concept, right? You don't just go and take the drug, like you actually do the hard work. Well, that set me up for the giant of a diagnosis that came my way back 4.5 years ago, which is this completely obscure, radical, absolutely insane diagnosis known as hepatitis C. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah.
So imagine, Jannine, like you getting diagnosed with this, disease that is associated with those that do drugs, that have a lifestyle of drugs, yet you've never done a drug in your life. You've never even been drunk in your life. So it's obviously going to feel very, very curious as to how in the world something like this could take place. Well, I am the alternative rebel now because of this experience, and I've started a podcast and, further just continued in growing my knowledge in this holistic world of health. And I've seen what's possible, and I've seen so many people heal from different things. I have come to a place where I'm like, you know what? I will always start in the holistic realm of things. And if medication is needed at some point, that's the last option for me personally. What it's taught me is more ownership in further refining my life. Leading up to that diagnosis, guess what Autumn was doing? Autumn was sitting for hours every day at a computer, working way too hard, striving way too hard at a job and a goal, and it was not conducive to health. So even though I got my pantry figured out now and I got cleaner options, there's still other components to health that we need to be mindful of. Was not exercising, was sitting there. And what I realized when I work, Jannine, is that I work so intensely that I end up sitting there and holding my breath while I work. So low oxygenation, a nightmare, right? Setting up for disease for sure. So, once again, another chance to take ownership. So now what do? I get up every morning and I run. I'm not a runner. I'm need one of those shirts that says if I'm running, it's because something's chasing me. But I learned to up and overcome that. And I learned eventually over a year's time, I can finally run around the block. It's kind of funny because I have horrible cardio. But anyway, doing that, doing the sauna, I've experienced all sorts of incredible holistic modalities, one in which I'm seeing an osteopath right now, the most incredible experience of my life. And it is having a beautiful, appears to be healing effect on my liver. And so that story, there is more to come on that as I am currently overcoming this. But I appreciate you asking about that because, just because we clean up.
Nice. I'm curious, of course, because you're like, I'm working with an osteopath. These days, can you give us a little hint? And then, of course, we'll make sure we link to your podcast because I'm sure you're going to share there as things are going on. And I see on social media you doing all kinds of stuff too. So
Yeah. Like what specifically? Like what is an osteopath? Is that what you're asking, or
no,
what's going on?
what's he doing? What's he doing? Because I'm thinking osteopath, and I'm thinking like rib adjustments. I'm thinking body work. I'm thinking, those kind
Body
of
work. So
foundation.
this is a very traditional osteopath. So first of all, I'm not talking about an allopathic osteopath. I'm talking about very traditional, like over 40 years in this. And he's like the second or third person off that's been trained from the original osteopath back from many, many years ago. Skill that somebody has. But he was telling me a story of like when he first experienced osteopathy, the practitioner put his hand on his head, on his skull, and the practitioner identified that he had a rib out from just touching his head and his skull. Mind-blowing work. So, and like he tells me all the time, like Tiger Woods, he's like, if Tiger Woods would just see an osteopath, he's like, I know exactly what's going on with him. I guess he's like on his 8th surgery. I don't know. I don't keep tabs on golf, but he's like, everything is from the knee down. If he would just see an osteopath, we could adjust this because this is what his profession does. He does the same thing over and over again. And so the body gets out of alignment and stress and other things take place. And, he can also work on scar tissue. That was another thing that I wondered about with my lichen sclerosus is because I had a C-section, your body's supposed to flow like a river, right? And any scars, it puts a dam. And so I've had some neural therapy to try and break up some of that scar tissue, I'm working with this osteopath, but it's incredible work. He balances the body. He can manually manipulate and adjust things. He can kind of like energetically.
I love the traditional osteopath training. Unfortunately, not a lot of them keep
my
with that,
gosh.
which is so sad because it's incredible, all of the tools and definitely the craniosacral part of it. I've seen so much just incredible stuff happen just in that. And so I'm hoping that some of the folks that are still going to osteopathic school, I don't even know how much they even train on all the old school techniques, but I hope that they still do some of them because it's so good.
God.
So
And
good.
kids are.
The fascial tissue, like all of it is just fascinating to me in terms of how they play in. And like you were saying, sitting, hunched forward, diaphragm's not moving, liver's not getting blood flow to it. All these
You
things
got it.
are, yeah, they're
Exactly.
things to think about. And like you said, with the C-section scar, as an acupuncturist, we constantly are working on opening up scar tissue. Neural therapy, for those of you guys that heard her say that and you're like, what is that? I mean, just neural therapy in and of itself is something unique that we don't have a lot of people talking about it. And we should, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Such good stuff here. I really appreciate you taking the time to come back in, share your story with us. I hope that folks who are listening, even if you're not experiencing lichen sclerosus yourself, but someone who is, or anyone that may mention it, send them our way to this podcast. But also, let's tell everybody about your podcast, how they can find you, and that way they can get a sense of where they can follow you and get more from you.
Yeah. Podcast is Know Better, Do Better. And there's actually a line in between the Know Better, Do Better, straight up and down. I don't know what that line is called. But if you just type in Know Better, Do Better, I think there's a couple other podcasts, but you'll see my face. It's a teal cover. Instagram is autumn.mclees, website autummclees.com. And I also do just about getting the right guide, doing the right things to support it, and believing that it's possible.
Thank you so much, Autumn, for coming back on.
Thank you so much for having me, Jannine. I love your mission. I love what you're about, and just thankful here to be here supporting you in it. So thanks so much.
Hey, Health Junkies. Before you go, I want to tell you about my upcoming workshop, March 18th, 2026. It's at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 p.m. Central. And like I mentioned, the end of 2025, I started to talk about me taking things to the next level with my health and my fitness. And I'm looking in 2026 to have some folks join me with this. If you've been thinking about getting out on adventures, traveling, doing some awesome things while you're traveling, or maybe you're wondering how you can stay in your sport or hobby, or even try something new at any age, but maybe you're thinking, am I up for this physically? Can I handle it? What about mentally? Can I still push? Can I still drive through hard things? Well, my next workshop has you covered. It's called The Art of Staying in Your Sport or Hobby and Being Adventure Ready at Any Age, so that you don't question if you can do something. It's when you can do it. So that's the theme of my March 18th workshop. In the workshop, we'll be talking about how blending the principles of Chinese medicine, self-body work, and the power of peptides and hormone balancing, whether it's herbal or bioidenticals. These can all help you to have all-day energy, a sharp mind, and a pain-free, lean body without handfuls of supplements, strict diets, and all day in the gym. So if this sounds like you and where you're at in life, come join me. And if you can't make it, there's always replays available when you register. The link to register is in my podcast notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's below. I hope to see you there. Have a great day, whatever you're doing.
Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.